How to design a wicker basket in SelfCAD 3D modeling application. Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to explain another interactive tutorial found in SelfCAD's tutorial webpage. The way I'm going to play this, instead of, you have two ways to play. You can click on this and then open in the web, or there's an option to download. You can actually download it from this page, or even before clicking on this, there's an option on this dotted lines here to download for a desktop version. Nevertheless, once you download them, you can upload. I've already downloaded this, and I'll go over here to tutorials. There's an option play tutorial, and then I have load file. It's going to tell me it wants to delete everything I have. It needs to make a complete new scene, so I click yes, and then it asks me where to do it. So what you get is you get a file with the name of the tutorial, and I click open, and then you get the same thing which you get once you click normally on this and start playing the open tutorial web. The only difference is if you click open a web, it will make a new project every time, and in this case the main purpose is you can use it on a desktop application, but I'm actually using it online. But for me it's just a way that I can reuse my existing workspace, existing project. I don't have to make a new project. Okay, so with that said, let's get started. I click start, and what we want to see over here is, first of all, I want to explain the main challenge, what this tutorial is about. So if we look at this object, what this is an object that has a pattern. So meaning is, it's a lot of repetitive things. It's not straight. The lines is like, it's twisted and it's different thing, but it's repetitive. It's almost the entire thing. It's made up of the same thing. And it also has like twists over here in the bottom, how you need to twist. Then it has a lot of circles that is repeated, kind of a pattern repeated, and same thing on top. So there aren't a lot of unique designs. It's just cleverly woven together. That's basically the main challenge we do over here. And this is basically what this is. Also, it's an artistic piece. I assume you can 3D print this. I'm actually not an expert in this case. Say if you need support, if not, they're gonna stick together how this will work. Based on what I've seen, what people print, I think this could be 3D printed. But the main purpose of an object like this is obviously just artistic piece for visualization, product design, and these type of stuff. So let's get started, see how we're gonna make this. And actually it's quite simple in SelfCAD. It just takes some creativity. So it's a artistic generally goes hand in hand with creativity. So this is basically what this is about. So it starts with something very basic, drawing a circle. It just activates a circle. It sets the amount of edges to 20, which I guess that's enough. I'm actually not sure why. It's later going to round that, so, but somehow it reduces the thing over here. And then it sets the precision so we can draw precisely. So this is actually a more technical way of drawing first, the same thing. And then you click, SelfCAD will give you this piece where you need to click. The idea here is that you need to create a space where to click on, and then you type in a value, how much it is, and you finalize it. So this point is just drawing a circle in the center, and this is basically a more artistic way of drawing. Okay, now it's going to activate an ellipse instead of a circle. Ellipse, you can make it look like a circle, but it can be different as well, obviously. And this is 12, setting the edges and changing the plane. So over here you have an option to draw different planes to set, but there's also option to rotate individual plane. Actually, I haven't seen many tutorials using rotation option, so it's actually good to see that. And it rotates it to 90 degree. So basically you may think this is a side plane. Normally you see people use a different side plane to do this type of stuff, but because it's an exact 90 degree angle, it's just simple to rotate that instead of changing plane. But you could have done it other way as well. And then it's unchecking this profile because it needs to make this as a new profile. Now there's two ways you can do that. You can go to profile settings, and there's an option there to make a new profile. Actually I can show it. You have a plus button over here to create a new profile. It's grayed out because I'm in the middle tutorial, but that's basically how you can do it. But for now, that's basically what it's doing. And clicking over here, and then typing in a value of 6, and then a 90 degree angle, and then clicking again to finalize it. So what we did over here, the width, I type in a value of 1, and then I guess I click here and exit this out. Okay. So what we've done over here basically is just drawn a tiny ellipse, which is over here. And this is going to be used to make something with it. But before we're going to use this, we're going to ignore this for now. We're going to add some more components. So it starts with adding some basic components. It sets over here a radius of 2 and 2. So this is symmetrical, top and bottom the same size. and again changing the segments to 16. So everything here is actually designed not too smooth, everything is reduced to segments, and that's how the designer have chosen to do it. Okay, so now what we have over here is, so far this is basically technical way of creating stuff. You created a cylinder, you created a small ellipse which is actually hidden now away by the cylinder, and you created a basic circle using most basic technical way of drawing. Now starts the creative part, what we do over here. So we have selected this object, it's still selected once it gets created, and then we need to select this profile 1, which is the circle we have over here. And what it's going to use over here is follow path, which is a really great tool for this type of stuff. And we can set the amount of copies. It sets it wants to make 20 copies. And the idea here is that we use the duplicate option. So duplicate is selected by default, so we didn't have to activate it. And it sets these settings front. Everything is the default setting, so only thing we had to do is the amount of copies, and then I finalize it. So what we end up having over here is these copies. Now, if you noticed while I was in the tool, these copies started actually in the center. It made the copies around the center of this. It's just because SelfCAD doesn't allow things to go below the grid. It get pushed off and it's over here. But technically the copies get copied from the center of the cylinder. So it's kind of half above this circle and half below the circle. There's also another interesting thing is that this designer used an approach on a circle to use the follow path. There's actually another way. There's no way good or bad. I mean, you could have just used another way. There is in the copy offset tool, a tool we use later. There's a function called pivot, and pivot makes a circular motion, circular copy, which basically you could have just, because it's centered, you could have just make this and kind of pivot that. But actually in that case, you would have needed to move it because the pivot will go around the center of the scene. So in order to use the pivot, you would have had to take this cylinder, move it away by the half, basically the radius, set it over here, and then you can use the pivot tool, which will automatically make the copies, the amount of copies you set. In this case, the follow path, did the same thing. So it's just a different way of doing it. Just good to know the different options. Okay, now we have a lot of different objects over here. So we just need to group it, and we click on group, and they're basically grouped together. Now this is also another important thing, that groups, you can only group objects that do not touch each other, they do not intersect each other, because if they intersect each other, they will make it non-manifold, because they become kind of like a single geometry. Merge actually makes them a single geometry. Group still gives you the option to ungroup it later. But if you would use later the group in Stitch and Scoop or other tools that will actually make them into a single geometry, it will be the same effect as merging, which will actually end up being non-manifold geometry. But in this case, because they don't touch each other, group or merge or union, doesn't matter. Any option that combines them together is perfectly fine, no problem whatsoever. Okay, so now what we do over here is we're going to select this object, and we're going to hide them away because we're going to work on this, see what's going on. So now we see back the circle and we see back this, and it's actually going to activate, let's say, this mode. I'm not sure exactly why. Okay, you select this profile as well. So you select this profile, circle, and then you select, I guess, what do you do now? Activate vertex. Oh, okay, so it's activating the vertices, vertex mode. And here it tells me to select this. Now, SelfCAD's interactive tutorial will allow you to select easily. So if I do marquee selection, something like this, it will automatically select everything that is needed. But in reality, in order to do this, the designer had to manually select this vertex and then skip one, go to the next, skip one, go to the next. And this is because you'll see later in the tutorial, it's actually using loop selection, some other advanced tools. Vertices does not have this option to loop select. And we also have an option pattern, a lot of different advanced settings. But when it comes to this mode, I can't actually open it. In vertex mode, you don't really have this because that's I think no other software has it, just from a technical way, the way it works. On edges and faces, all these stuff, you have an option to make patterns. On vertices, if you need to skip, unfortunately, you'll have to do it manually. But as I said, in the interactive tutorial, SelfCAD makes it easy. You can just kind of select them, doesn't matter how, because we know what needs to be selected. So the case here is what's happening here is we select every second one, select one, skip one, select one, skip one. And then we're going to scale this in, and this is basically just visualizing, and we have an option key proportion. Now, this is interesting because if you don't scale in key proportion, you will have to scale different sides, and this may also create a different effect how it scales. Once you turn on key proportion, you can just scale one direction, the X, you make it for 80, and basically that's scaled the entire thing like this. And now what you need to do is you have to deselect everything, so I just click on the grid. and you select the other side. So basically it's selecting the one that was not selected before, key proportion is still on, and you set this to 120. So basically this is how you get this design. Now again, I can't actually explain exactly what happened over here. You deselect this, because this is just artistic way of looking how you play with it, but I know I've seen from different designs, with key proportion, without key proportion, you get different results, and that's just naturally how it works when you scale them proportionally or not. And this is again something that you could have done in many different ways, but this is more an artistic way of doing it. In a more technical way, you would kind of use the pivot motion or something else to make objects and cut them out one from another in different ways, but this is some of the easiest way to do it, and if you know how to scale them, then yes, you can make this work quite easily this way. Okay, so what you do over here now is we're going to click on, let's see, click on the highlighted part selection cube, or use circuit, turn off region selection. Okay, so I just have to turn off region selection, which you can click again here to turn it off, or just click on the grid, and that's fine. So now we're going to select is this profile, and what you see over here, what happened here is we're going to use again the follow path tool, and in the follow path tool it matters the order of operation. So the first we had this kind of star shape selected now, and now we're going to select this shape as well. So let's see what's going to happen now, and it's going to use now the extrude mode. So it uses extrude mode, so basically it's extruding this and then finalizing path. Okay, so basically what it did is it extruded this shape, this small tiny ellipse was extruded along this path, and basically so it created this type of shape. So basically it converted this into a mesh. Now you could have actually done this using simple extrusion to get a height. The only thing is that you have this curvature. You see, this is not flat. If this would have been 100% flat, simple straight up, this would work. And this would be basically a 2D shape converted into 3D, simply extrude them. But in this case, this has some curvature, it's not flat, and this is why we needed to use a different method to do this. Now you could have done other tools, there's like Loft tools, other tools that can do this, but I guess this tutorial is mostly about follow path, and this is one of the beloved tools for artists, and this is really an easy way to do it. And actually I think we're going to end up using all of the features in follow path, or at least most of them. It has quite a lot of features. Okay, so now we're going to use, after we created this basic shape, we're going to actually to round them even more. We're going to use round objects, and we're going to set them to 2 and basically finalize it. Okay, so let me just explain what happened until now, here what you did. So what happened here actually is that we used some very basic technical shapes and creating stuff, 2D shapes, and actually low resolution, relatively low resolution. If you remember, the circle was set to less points. Now I know why, because actually we needed to scale them later and make this and create this shape. If we would have had more edges, then actually the scale would be different. The star shape would be smaller pieces, smaller triangular pieces here. So we needed to have this shape. And the same with all of this, it needed to be first basic, but then we use round object to actually add more roundness. It's basically just smoothing out the surfaces. So it's the same idea as adding resolution first to this, but actually make it more smooth afterwards, after the fact, which I guess gives you better results. So now we have the first element. All we did now here is create the first element, and as I said in the introduction, that this shape basically is made up just of patterns. So you just need to create a few basic elements, and then you're going to use some automated functions to repeat them and create a pattern. So that's basically, we're getting close to that. We're still going to first set over here the height to 3 on this one, and this is just lifting it up a little bit from the floor and closing it. And now we're going to, let's say, click and show the group. Okay, so we're showing this. So just a visualization. It's actually not needed as a function, just a visualization. But what you see over here is that we have these shapes going on. This is inside of this, and this is outside of this. So because this, it's actually strange from a visual perspective. It looks like these cylinders are deeper in than other, but if you remember the way it was created, and if you look at it from simple here, they're actually completely aligned with a circle. It's just that this makes it visually look like the poles go inside and outside, but it's actually just this ribbon around that makes it look like that. But nevertheless, we go now to copy offset. So this is the tool that I said before. It actually has an function that's called pivot, and pivot will make a simple rounded motion go around. But now we're going to use different things. We're going to use first the basic settings position, and we're going to set Y to 6, and now we're going to add another option. This you can kind of like create a program. You can add a lot of stuff together, and now we're going to add just 2 functions. We're going to add the position to 6, and we're going to add a rotation. We have to first set this to be rotate, so you can set whatever it is, and now once it's set to rotate, I'm going to make it to 18. So these things is something that's actually, it looks very easy now, but the designer had to calculate them probably manually, first rotating one to see what rotation angle works, and then program that automatically. But yeah, this has to be played with to figure out how much you need to rotate it. It's something, or you can either sometimes technically calculate them, or sometimes visually arrange them. Doesn't matter, but will work the same, whatever works for you. So now once I've positioned this program, what this should do, it should move up, make copies. Each copy will be moved up by 6 and will be rotated by 18, and a total of 15 copies. I click copy, and the magic happens. So you create all of this. Now I can exit this out. So now what you have over here is you have a lot of pieces, but they're still kind of, first of all, they're separate pieces. So we're going to do the same we did before, group. And as I said before, if they don't touch, you can group them. And we're not grouping them together with the original poles, because then if they touch, there will be self-intersection, will be a problem. We're just grouping these separately, and the bolts are separately. We have 2 groups. But now what we need to do here is we're going to select this as well, and actually it's going to selecting both groups together, and it's going to simply taper them. So it's going to set here the origin. Okay, the origin would be set to top, I guess. Not here, this is set origin layer to top, synchronic and then settings. Okay, I'm not seeing the option. Oh, over here, I'm sorry. The highlight actually is highlighted on you. This should be highlighted, just this. Okay, so I thought the center have to push. I guess the highlight here is not as good as it should be. So I have to set this to top, and then I have to set the X to 30, which is basically just scaling this in the Z to 30, also 30. So we are basically just, okay, and closing it. So all we did is we tapered this, as the name suggests, just tapering, and we tapered this. The top and bottom means where it should taper, so you want to taper the bottom. So you could have technically probably tapered the bottom and made it negative, or from center you couldn't. So you had to taper like from one end, because not from the center, either top or bottom, and I guess yes, that's how it should. To keep the top size intact, just make smaller the bottom. So that's basically the way it was set, to taper from top, and then that means that from top to bottom it gets tapered. When you set taper top, it actually tapered the bottom, made the bottom smaller. So kind of tapered it down from top. Okay, so now what you do over here is we have to select these profiles, and it's just for the purpose of hiding them away, I think. Yes, we're just hiding these away. So we have a clean slate now. Everything is clean here, and we have these 2 elements created. So we're going to go now to the next. We create a spiral, which in this case is just another element. I'm just going to click next to all of the settings. It has a lot of settings. And all it did is it took a spiral, and instead of keeping it as a spiral, it actually created them, finalized it. What it created is kind of a stretch thing to bend them. So instead of manually kind of creating this as a spline, and then maybe using follow path to create this as a mesh, and just use a spiral to do this. And this is where it comes in creativity. It's you just have to see what is available for you and to make it simpler. If you don't find something, you may need to create them from scratch, but in this case the spiral was a perfect shape to do what needed to be done. So, and then it's going to use again 3D sketch. It's going to create another circle, and it's going to set the rotation back to 0, and it's going to click here and then type in, let's say 50, and click here. Okay, and exit out. So I'm actually not sure why we had to create a new circle. We couldn't use the circle we created before. I'm actually not sure, but now we use this spiral. Could be because the amount of edges is different than before. I actually don't know, but nevertheless, what we have over here is we have a circle and we have a spiral, and we can use a follow path again, but in this case we can use a wrap option. So wrap option means it's going to basically okay, and we have to set the direction to top. You see here is we have to use direction. This looks ugly because it's wrapping it in the wrong way. So if we set the top, it's basically going to do this as expected, and all it does now here, it wraps around. So instead of making a copy, it takes this long spiral, and it bends it around this. So it's kind of using the bending function, but instead of bending it on a circular motion, whatever, based on the preset settings, here you have a lot more flexibility. You can actually bend it around any shape. And the problem here is this actually looks good for the basic shape. The problem is just that it did not close this. So bending this wrap is not able to close. It doesn't know how to close a shape. It can just bend it around. There are some other advanced settings, the way you can do it, sometimes repeat or not. We didn't use advanced settings, just the basic settings. And in this case, it left this open over here. So it's going now to use polygon selection because there's a lot of faces here. So in Polygon, you can select an entire thing together as long as they're flat. It's selecting these two, and it's going to delete them. So I'm clicking the delete button, and you could have used the button here or just the delete key, doesn't matter. And the goal here is to bridge this gap. But when you bridge this, there's actually three things that needs to happen when you close something like this. First of all, there's something that is called interfaces, and this is what we manually deleted. There are some tools that can delete them, but it's always better to manually delete them if you know how to do it. The second thing is what we need to do here is we need to create this section. There's a few ways we can do it. We can kind of make them together, stitch them together using a few tools like edit details, other tools, stitch them together. Or you can use a tool that is going to build in the missing piece over here automatically. And then once you add the missing piece, we need to make sure they actually connect perfectly. So first of all, to simplify this and to make sure we have something good, we have here triangles. It's going to use resolution tool and going to make resolution to 0, which is going to simplify it. So you see it removed it, it converted it into quads, which is always easier to work with. Now it's going to use edge, turn on edge mode, and it's actually going to use loop selection, what I mentioned earlier in the video. So we turn on loop selection, and the way loop selection works, I click on one setting over here, this edge, and then I click on the next edge, and it automatically selects entire loop. It's going to do the same thing over here. I click on this one, and then on this one, it automatically created these two loops. Okay, so now we can exit it. So what we have here, we have selected the edges on both sides, and it's going to use the Loft tool. And in Loft is basically just creating this. In the segment settings, I'm setting the segments to 1 because we don't need more than that, and we close it. Okay. So now it's important to know, I want to say here just a simple comment here, that Loft is actually, in general, if you go in most applications, Loft is a parametric modeling tool, which means the difference is it actually creates a surface. When you create here something, you actually create a surface and then use some triangulation to fill the surface. And in this case, SelfCAD's Loft has an option to fill them with quads or not quads. In this case, was filled as quads. SelfCAD had an old Loft before, which was actually working more on a polygon modeling application, which was actually bridging them, not creating a surface, just creating faces, which is similar to the way Revolve works in SelfCAD. It's faces based, which both of them have benefits and disadvantages. As a new tool, SelfCAD has replaced the Loft with parametric modeling because it has for more complex shapes, this is better. However, the other old Loft actually has a lot of advantages which you cannot do in parametric modeling, and actually SelfCAD was the best of them. You cannot do them in 3D parametric modeling applications. So SelfCAD is going to add soon another feature called bridging, which is going to be kind of the old Loft. You do find them in some applications, something called bridge, which is actually acting a little bit similar to SelfCAD's old Loft. So that's why they decided to actually switch them and introduce a new tool. But nevertheless, what happened over here is because we created this surface, it actually filled in a lot of extra faces. Now, in the original SelfCAD's Loft, or the way it's going to be called next, bridge, soon there should be hopefully this tool, they would have understood and kept the original face structure. So you could have connected, otherwise there wouldn't be extra faces over here and there would be no problem. But in this case over here, we added all these extra faces, and because of that, this is actually not connected over here. In order to make this manifold, all of these edges must connect to others, and there must be basically something that's called watertight and connect to each other, otherwise it's not good. So for this, it's going to use the geometry clean tool to fix this problem. So actually don't need to remove duplicates, it's turning off this. And it needs to cut intersecting edges. This is what it is. It also turns on remove interfaces, which actually we did it before manually. So I'm not sure why this is turned on because it's not needed. This was manually done. If you remember, we deleted 2 polygons. So all we need actually is the cut intersecting faces. And if you click over here, look what's happening. This actually created these cuts. You can see the way it connected it. It found the vertex over here and far away, and it made each of these, all of these edges here, to actually connect them, same all of them, and this is how this becomes manifold. This object is now manifold. Okay, so now once we create it again, we create a new element. We already have two groups as elements. Now we created this new element, and we're going to use copy offset again, but in this case we're going to use just a rotate. We're rotating this and setting Y to 14 and make 3 copies. So in this case, if you can see the difference what we did before, we lift it up every time, we moved it up. Here we're just rotating it. So the copy is just going to basically create this section over here. It took this, instead of twisting this in one piece, it basically created just one and rotated a few, which gave it this look over here. And now because they intersect each other, okay, they connect each other, they basically touch each other, you cannot use group, you have to use stitch and scoop, which is a tool that is union, which is a tool that is going to combine them and solidify them and make the extra cuts. Now we used before geometry clean cut intersections, which did this, and they're good for basic cuts, something like solving a problem like this, but they're not good in intersecting each objects, like multiple objects, and kind of more complex stuff. This is doing a lot more complex stuff. It finds intersection between objects and it cuts them. That's basically what union is doing. So each tool has their own purpose. Now we go to move, and we're simply moving up Y to 2. We'll see soon why. Actually, oh, I know why. Okay, we'll see soon. So we're going to create now a torus, and I'm just going to set next to set the settings. So it's a small torus, and click OK. And now it's going to use this torus plus this profile that we created before. We already used the same profile was used with the with this spiral to follow path, and we used the wrap around. Now we're going to use the copy function, again follow path, and we're going to use the copy function to make 12 copies. Okay, and it basically creates these copies over here, and we have to set, you see now it creates it in the flat way, so it creates the top like this. Now you could have first rotated this, I guess, also, but if you do this like top, it works good. Now the reason we move this up is actually, you see this circle, each of these circles are positioned at the center of this, so it needs to go below the circle. Now if the circle would have been, if the profile would have been on the floor, this would then later, after you finalize it, jump back up, because SelfCAD does not allow things to go below the grid. So that's basically why we had to lift it up first. And actually it did do this. Okay, it jumped up a little bit, but it moved it up just enough. Yes, so you can see we use the profile. The profile actually is on the floor, and the circle was positioned at the center of the profile, so it jumped up. But we first lifted up these rotated pieces, these whatever you call them, these spirals. So that's why it jumped up and actually positioned them correctly over here based on this. So this had to be pre-calculated, how much has to be moved up. That's not a problem, you can always move it later, but it's much better if you calculate first. So you make it jump up and then become in the center perfectly as expected. Okay, so now what it's going to do is just going to, I guess, click on union to select, okay. Click on union to select it, so it clicks on the object that is called union, which was created from the previous tool. So we have now the union was these objects, and then we have all of these toruses, and then it's going to combine them all. Again, because they touch each other, we have to use union, we cannot use group, and we combine them and finalize it. So here we go. So now we can basically isolate this, so we see only this object. And let's see what we do now here. So we create a new cylinder, and I'll click next to set all of the settings. It's a small cylinder. Okay, this is actually also very interesting. So what's happening over here is we created a cylinder with the exact size over here to position the same circle, a small cylinder, and now it's going to select this the top polygon, and it's going to use inset, which is a tool that if you use it polygon mode, you have an option to make it work kind of inset entire polygon, and you set it up the amount of 8, and it also has an advanced setting to set the copies to 4. So what's going to happen here is, and then finalize. So what's happening here is that we made a few insets. Now we have to select this. Okay, so basically what we did here is we created this shape. We created a basic cylinder, but we created these loops here inside using the inset tool, and again make it as a pattern by using a repeat 8 times or 4 times. So we created 4 insets, repetitive insets, and did something like this. Now what it's going to use here is it's going to split this off. So basically we no longer need this original part. We just needed this top. So we use the basic cylinder, and then we have this copy, just the top copy. And if you understand the way this works is, now if you copy this off, we have a single polygon without thickness. So actually this is non-manifold, not this original part, not this part, because once they split off, they're not watertight. So we're later going to fix this. First we're going to shape this, and we're going to use chamfer. And in chamfer, this is also interesting the way it's done. So we set the chamfer to 1, okay, kind of like this. And in the fill setting, there's an option to fill polygons. So it turns off the fill polygons. And now we do something like this. What happened here is that we got only this outside. Now you cannot really see it because it's overlaid on top of the thing that we copied away. But we actually can see if I hover on it, we got only this, because if you chamfer without fill polygons, it gets only the chamfered pieces and it deletes the inside, which is an easy way of doing this. And then we're going to add thickness to make this manifold. So thickness is going to be 2, and now you got this basically. So this is, again, this is something that is quite an interesting tool on SelfCAD. You can do it, but yes, it's one of the easiest ways to make a pattern like this. And now we got this shape. Okay, so now what we're going to do is it's going to round them. So if you can notice over here, we're using the same tools over and over, just a few tools. And this actually, these are the best tools for hard surface modeling for these things. So yeah, the reason we use this, because this style of design uses basically these tools. Now we turn it on like this, so we can see we have the basic shape. The problem here is we're going to align them. This is not aligned now. And you can see this is the difference between artistic or technical model. They're not really pre-calculated, everything exact measurements, it's just visually. And if you look at them visually, this is sticking out here, and it's also not aligned. It should be aligned by this. So we're going just to use basic transformation to fix this. We're going to go to scale, and we are keeping proportion to make sure it scales proportionately, and the X is set to 94. And in this case, this is the correct size. Okay, now we go to rotate. And if you see, I didn't have to close scale, because if you switch from one transformation to the other, you can just switch, and it saves you a step to close it, I think, to close the tool. And it sets the Y to 12, which is, again, this is pre-calculated why it is, but this is basically makes them aligned with this stuff over here. You can see it sticks into this. This is combined over here. And now we go to turn off polygon selection, and we have to select, you can imagine what you can do. It's a repetitive process, same we did before. We select the union, which is now all these objects plus this mesh 29 that we just created, the rounded piece, and we're going to union them, combine them together, and finalize it. Okay, so now what we're going to do here is we're going to isolate this one. So we are sticking, you can see we created this piece that is a perfect manifold piece, and it's created. It's hard to imagine, but this is where it comes in, to understanding the application, understanding the available tools. It's hard to imagine this was created from a basic cylinder. All we did is we took the top of the cylinder, we made the inset, which gave it these rings, 4 insets in a row, and then we basically used chamfer to make these things, but we deleted the polygons without fill polygons, so we created this, and then round objects. So there's like a 3-step process to turn on an entire a top of a cylinder. This actually, we split off the part from the cylinder, yes, but you know, a few steps, 4 or 5 steps maybe in total, and created this. Okay, so now what we're going to do here is we're going to use the group 2, and we're going to visualize everything, so we can already see what's happening here. And as you can see, it's not aligned perfectly, so it needs to scale it again. It's going to position, it's turning on symmetry, and it's positioning X to 80, and now it's going to move it up to position over here, and oh, actually it's going to move down this one, so it sets it to 0. Okay, so we have the first copy, which is perfectly aligned over here to 0. We close this, and now we're going to copy offset to make another copy on top. You could have just made copy, move it up and scale it, but it's using this thing over here, which is 103, to position it, and then it sets a setting for scale, which is to make it bigger for the top. So this is going to be 28 by 28, the X and Z. This is 28, and this is 28, and okay, and then click copy. So we created this copy over here on top, basically, and I set it out. So now we're going to deselect this, And let's see, we're going to select the group, select this group, and it's going to, let's say, move it Y to 4. Oh, okay, so it moved this up, this thing a little bit to align it with this. Okay, just positioning here, scaling, positioning. And now we need to select this union. So we have selected here basically all of the pieces. We have selected this, not the top one. We selected everything except the top, because the top as a basket, you need to be able to open it basically. So it leaves it separate. And now we are going to union them together. It takes a little slower already because we're already dealing with over 100,000 faces, but still okay, just a few seconds more. And now what we're going to do is we're going to select this one. And now we selected two. We have actually two elements that is to be left. Everything else could be deleted already. We have these two main things. Just the top stays separated because this is a basket to be able to split them off. But for colors, we select them, both of them, and use this color and finalize it. And that's basically it. We're done over here. So let's see if I'm going to, we can delete actually everything else. Or yeah, this is just isolated this. And this is basically the basket, how it's created. So just to repeat again what we have over here, the almost entire thing was used first of all creating some basic shapes, cylinders, circles, ellipse, and torus. The only thing we used here a little bit more creating was the what is it? The spiral, was the thinned out spiral. And then the majority of the stuff here was used the repetitive motions, which is copy offset. It used an inset to repeat, the option to repeat, the macro to repeat. And then it used a few options on follow path. It used follow path to extrude something around, to bend something around, wrap around, and to copy around. And then it used a combination of combination. Things that did not touch was used group to combine. Things that touch each other was used stitch and scoop. And that's basically it in colored. So it's relatively simple. There's obviously these type of artistic tools, designs, you can make it in many different ways. But it's actually quite clever the way it was created. And I think you can learn a lot from this. Okay, I hope this helps you. Thanks for watching. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions for my next video. And thanks, and have a great day. Bye.